Thank you for meeting me today. I had a few questions for you in regards to the new drainage fee that Proposition 1 is proposing for the November ballot. The first question I have for you is, what is the difference between a fee and a tax?
Well, in this case, what you have is somebody proposing a fee to get around paying a property tax to increase revenues for the city. It means that everyone that already pays property taxes is going to pay a lot more in fees if Prop 1 is passed. Now, to show you how big this fund that they're talking about is, we've got, if you look at all the property taxes the city takes in a year is $846 million. We've had two estimates by Prop 1 supporters of what this drainage fee is going to take in. One's $300 million and the other's $400 million. But to show you just how large of an increase is that if you divide that by how much taxes the city's already collecting, that's a 35% increase on the 300 number. The $400 million number is 47% the size of all the property taxes they take in a year. So this fund, this Prop 1 drainage fund, is a huge fund of taxpayer money.
So this 35% is in addition to the 40% water increase that the city has imposed on residents?
Right, and this doesn't count the fact that this fund is already on top of the fact that every homeowner in the city of Houston is paying 40% more over the next 3 years. City ordinance was passed and raised everything by 18% this year, and then there's 3 more increases, and that adds up to 40%. At the end of that period, we'll have the highest water rates in the country on major cities, with the exception of San Diego. And you know that San Diego, they have to pump the water from the Colorado River over the mountains into the city. So we're paying an enormous amount for water already, and what needs to happen is the city needs to get efficient about what they're charging taxpayers for city services.
Okay. Can you tell me the impact that this would have on a senior citizen?
Right now, here's the real big problem with the way that this money is being raised. Because it's a fee, they can get around what are prohibitions in the property tax code and exemptions. So for your over 65 homeowner, they're not exempt. They don't get a break on this tax because they have to pay this fee separately from their property taxes. It means that all the over 65 homeowners are going to pay the full effect of this tax, which I believe is at least $100 a year. That's on a very low valued or very small structure home. So, but that's $100 in a recession that they don't have.
Right. So, in essence, this drainage fee would be violating the homestead exemption that a senior citizen currently has in their home?
Right. It violates the tradition and the law of what should be in property tax exemptions. Okay. And a real area of concern is the fact that this is not only going to go after over 65 homeowners heavily, it's going after churches, charities, and schools. Now, you know, there's a terrible public policy being set here because you don't want to tax other taxing jurisdictions, so they have to pass a tax through to their business owners and their homeowners, okay? Because that's just a hidden tax. So that's why the state legislature exempted churches, schools, and charities from property taxes because they didn't want that tax burden being passed on to school boards and churches, people in their collection plates, and charities trying to, get more money for worthy projects. So what Prop 1 does as a former taxman, it's an anathema to me because it goes after the people that can least afford to pay. The whole problem with Prop 1 is that there's never been any discussion of the taxpayer's ability to pay. It's all about what special interests want. And they want more money. Well, tough luck in this economy. They shouldn't get it. That's why I'm strongly recommending a vote no on Proposition 1.
I have one more question. You mentioned schools. If this fee is imposed on schools, how would that affect a person's property tax as well?
Well, see, because because Spring Branch Independent School District and Houston Independent School District are Robin Hood schools. That's what you all understand it. They're really in school equalization problems. They can't charge any more money and get any more reimbursement from the state. They're already fixed. they've already got to send money to low social economic ISDs like Laredo ISD in the state. So this money's going to have to come off their bottom line. And the only way they're going to pay for it is with teacher layoffs. And my guess is looking at HISD, this is at least a $2 to $3 million fee for them to pay. But again, the whole concept of Prop 1 is wrong. We shouldn't be charging schools, churches, charities, because they're just going to have to lay people off. That's all they're going to be able to do to be able to pay this fee.
So there's a conflict with the promise that Proposition 1 has, in which it's going to be creating jobs, but the backside to that is that if the fee is imposed on schools,
Right.
then school districts are going to have to lay off teachers or personnel.
Right. All the federal studies on incentive or stimulus say that a tax dollar doesn't get you 100% back in the private sector. So this is not well thought out from an economic perspective, because this is tax revenue. And tax revenue never returns more jobs than it takes away. And the perfect example is you can't get past the prohibitions on the school districts. They can't raise any more money. They can't pass along these taxes. They're going to have to lay people off. They have no other option.
Okay. And HISD currently assesses their tax how?
When I was Harris County Tax Assessor, they used to use the Harris County Tax Office. They would put a rate on a value, and then a bill would go out to pay property taxes on. That's why it's called ad valorem.
Okay.
Now, what this is a way to get around making it a property tax. I think it's an illegal attempt, in my opinion, to get around all the property tax code. This is a drainage fee that looks and acts like a property tax. But it's not, it doesn't have the same exemptions, doesn't have the same protection. There's no appeal mechanism. And the other thing is there's no data that exists, even at the appraisal district, how much impervious cover you have at your home. In fact, the best they can do is estimate it. And that's why they estimated low. The numbers are low. They're saying, oh, it only costs the average home $60. We know it's at least $100. And that's at the minimum $125 million a year. Not at the $300 million level or the $400 million level. That means that $100 a year could go to $250 or $300 really quickly. There is no cap on this. Let me say this is probably the worst piece of public policy I've seen, because I've never seen a charter amendment ever that had a minimum fee. Normally all the fees are maximum. It tells you that your sales tax can't exceed 1%. It tells you what your maximum property tax rate is. This Prop 1 is open-ended. It's a blank check, because it says you must raise $125 million, and then you can raise any amount of money above that.
So what that means right now is that Proposition 1 has an initial fee that's going to vary as they go along.
It's an initial minimum.
Okay.
And they're going to take at least $125 million to start with. They're going to transfer money from the general fund, from property tax money that's already paying for these services. And then over time, they can raise the fee to whatever level they would like to. There is no limit here. See, the reason why the property tax code has limits, has exemptions for over 65 homeowners, has exemptions for churches, schools, and charities, is because they're trying not to tax people that can't afford to pay. The real problem here with Prop 1 is that everybody pays the full rate, and it's a minimum, which means that there's never going to be any priority set on what needs to be done. They're always going to spend the minimum plus X amount every year. That's the nature of government, okay? You know, in the 10 years I've seen that I was elected tax assessor, I never saw anybody seriously try to control their expenses in government except the Harris County Tax Office.
Okay.
And a couple other county departments.
And what does that mean for business owners? Say, for example, a daycare center.
This is, the more you own, the more parking spots you have, the more you pay. You can look at that at the minimum tax level. You're looking at $1,415 per acre to pay for this tax. That's why a school pays so much, because they've got so much improved area. Think of a church, okay? They've got all these parking spots that they use on Sunday, and they're going to have to pay on that big improved area. If you're a business owner, the Building Manager Association of Houston said that their associate members are going to pay $10 million more in just 1 year. And that's at the minimum fee. Plus, all this debate, means that the bottom line is that no tax ever stops. They only get bigger through time. And that's why you don't want to vote for Prop 1. You want to stop Prop 1 now because it's a bad concept. It's an open-ended commitment by the taxpayers with no accountability to the city of Houston of how they're going to spend the money.
And how would a property owner be able to contest it?
See, now here's something that as a former director of the appraisal district and also a tax assessor, there's no methodology for a protest here. There are no records that say how many square feet you got on your porches and your driveways. There's no way to appeal it. There's no way to protest it. If there's an error there, how do you go through it? There's none of that exists. We were doing an estimate. We think it's going to take upwards to $75 million to $100 million to survey the city to get the right data, because there's 700,000 accounts you have to look at to make sure you're not making a mistake.
And where would the city get the money from?
Well, they're going to have to pull it out of general revenue to do this. See, none of this has been thought through. They think that what they can do is just send people a bill and an estimate that says, well, we can take what we think is your square footage times 38%, and that's what you owe. Well, why should anybody pay that type of bill? They're trying to raise more money and not use the property tax code to do it. That's why they're trying to use the drainage fee and the water code.
Okay, and what about the lockbox or the dedicated fund that they're mentioning?
Well, the lockbox, the whole concept of a lockbox is a scam, in my opinion, because it's a lockbox without a top. Okay? Because this is a minimum tax or fee, the obligation is for the taxpayers to put $125 million in a year, but there's no limit to how much can actually be charged. So the idea of calling it a lockbox, in my mind, is a political sham, because again, there's no limit to what the taxpayers can pay on this fund. And the problem is that the general fund has been paying these expenses. So we're going to move effectively that money out of the general fund and put it in this lockbox without a top, which means we can charge whatever, the taxpayer is going to be charged whatever rate city government wants to charge them. And then, gee, I guess that frees up the money that was already in the other fund. So we're going to be paying twice effectively over time. That's what I see as a former tax assessor.
Okay, and one more question. Would the city be able to refinance its debt in any way? How would that affect property owners?
Let me try to explain. Most city debt is not even voter approved anymore. And the real problem with city finances has been that under the Mayor White administration, they borrowed $250 million from pension fund proceeds and moved it from the pension fund and put it into the general fund, and they spent about 30, 40, 50 million a year, and they spent all that money. So we've already borrowed from our pension funds, put it in our general fund, and we spent it. Terrible public policy. Now, if they hadn't done it, there's only $187 million of money there now. That was their whole reserve. So they would be, they'd be broke. They wouldn't have any money in their general fund. So the whole problem at the city has been about where to get more revenue, not to do budget cuts. In fact, I talked to more than one city council member who said they came in with $30 million cuts in the budget, $20 million butts in the budget cuts, and the mayor rejected them all. Said we don't need them. Because all the plan has been is to try to bring on a fund that will be the size of 35 to 47% the size of all the property tax collections they are now. So what's happening is, I mean, it's literally the city saying, I need more money, okay? And this is how they're trying to solve their financial problems in the future. The way to solve it is like everybody else in the recession. Balance your checkbook, cut your expenses, and quite frankly, that means less people down at the city being employed, and that's what we did in county government when I was there, and that's what the city needs to be doing now in a recession.